I help moms get clear on what their next steps should be so that they can mother from a place of strength and courage instead of from a place of fear. So if you've been following me at all on Periscope or you've been paying attention on Facebook onto my business page, then you know that I recently just released my first book, Twin Mom Method, Being Honest with Your Children. And as I'm using this week to basically go through a few of the highlights from my book in how I approach developing those strong relationships, those trusting relationships, and creating a safe place for my children to feel that they are welcome to come and talk to me about whatever might be on their mind or whatever questions they might develop. Because as you know, they're children. They're going to develop questions and they're going to need answers. And my goal is for them to feel comfortable coming to me so that they can get the answers that they need. And specifically the answers that are truthful and not just what this world and this culture is trying to instill for them. And so today I wanted to talk specifically about how do you deal with that question, where do babies come from? It is the question that many parents, many of us moms do dread. And I've gotten that question multiple times. If you're familiar with me at all, you know I have 3 amazing little boys. I have a 9-year-old and twin 7-year-olds, and they are all boy to the 10th degree, and I love them dearly. And when I'm not sure which child specifically came up with the question first, because they're only 2 years apart, as you can tell from my pregnancies in terms of their birth dates. And they're actually 2 years and 2 weeks apart. So they're all born actually in July. So July is a fun birthday month in our house. But when one of my children first started really asking that question, he was about 3 or 4 years old. And so I'm telling you, it starts early. Some of you had that question start earlier. And in my house, yes, they had questions similar to that earlier, but they really weren't asking the deep nuts and bolts of that question. So when I'm telling you that my son in particular that I'm talking about today brought this question up, I'm talking about he wanted the answers. I'm telling you that the stork dropped him a baby off at the door, or we find the babies in a basket. Those answers were not cutting it for him. My child, I'm talking about where do babies come from, and he wanted to really know. And so originally when he first asked that question, I know I kind of gave what I felt was, a pretty good response. I gave the general truthful answer that, God allows mommies to grow babies in their belly so that they can eventually, when they are ready and they've grown big enough or too big for mommy's belly, then they would come out. Unfortunately, that was not enough for my child. And so, yes, at 3 or 4 years of age, my child needed to know the truth. And when I say needed, I'm telling you, and this is what I talk about in my book, our children need answers, just like you. If you think about to the time when you first started asking that question, and maybe you don't exactly remember, maybe it was too long, maybe you're having trouble remembering what you did this morning, especially if you're a busy mom like me, I get it. I understand. But the point I'm really trying to make you to see clearly is whenever you started asking yourself that question, you really wanted to know. Maybe there was discussions happening amongst your peers that didn't really make sense to you. And so you decided to ask, what is the answer to that question? Or maybe you just never thought of it quite before. Maybe it was a class that you had in school that started introducing some concepts or some materials that were never discussed in your home or were only touched on. And so then you really started to think it through for yourself, and you started asking what was the answer for yourself so you can get that clarity. And so this is the kind of thinking that I'm asking you as a mom to think through for yourself. And that will actually help you understand where your child is coming from. Oftentimes, because we're the parent now, we're not the child, and we start thinking for our children. And oftentimes, because we're not comfortable, or maybe we don't know the answer, we maybe brush it off, or we assume that they're really not old enough to answer that question. But what I strongly encourage you to consider, mom, is if your child is asking the question, they are old enough. And I say that understanding that your answers need to be listening for the true question that your child is asking so that you can answer their question. So, for example, when my child started asking about where do babies come from, and I started explaining to him that, God provides a baby and allows this, and this is how amazing God is, and how he puts a baby in a mommy's belly, and the baby allows that baby to grow. Well, he wanted to know, well, how does the baby grow? So, of course, I went through to explain in terms of, the nourishment and eating, and just like how we nourish our bodies with all the proteins and the carbohydrates and everything that we eat, because yes, my particular child does know about proteins and carbohydrates. We've learned that in school and we applied in our home. And so this is what I'm essentially attaching him to what he's already familiar with so that it can help build his understanding. And so in that same way, a mom obviously eats and nourishes her body and has to eat a lot more so that she can feed herself and the extra baby. And in certain cases, because we are a family of twins, then if there's more than one baby in there, then the mommy has to eat a little bit more so that her body can nourish all of these people at the same time. And so I would have hoped, as many of you might have hoped, that that would have been sufficient. No, not with this child. He wanted to know, well, how exactly did the baby get in there? And so I know oftentimes we've heard some parents use when a mommy and daddy get married, or when two people love each other, or whatever type of scenario that you kind of try to paint that nicer picture that you would hope for your child, and maybe what you are fearful of in terms of happening, that out of wedlock child, or that unmarried child, or that child, your grandchild, being birthed without two parents in the picture. I understand those concerns completely. Believe me, I do. But what I want to caution you about, Mom, is you don't want to focus on what you don't want to have happen and miss really talking to and helping your child understand their world and accepting themselves in their world truthfully. So, for example, if I stick to the idea of only mommies and daddies who are married can have a baby, and when they meet their friend whose parents are divorced, then what's going to happen to my child's understanding of where do babies come from? It's going to be unstable, and he's going to continue to have questions and essentially question whether I really know where babies come from. And so this is kind of the example that I'm trying to help you understand, that we really need to be honest and truthful with our children so that when they think for themselves, which is the goal that I'm trying to, one of my many goals that I have, and I'm training my children, I want them to be able to think for themselves. And they're going to realize and they're going to test what I say against their reality and what they experience. And so this is also why I approach trying to tie in what they're already familiar with what they're trying to understand and learn. And so, yes, I went into more detail into how the actual baby gets into a mommy's belly. Yes, we do use the actual words for the body parts. And so I do explain what the body part is for and how God created a male versus a female differently. And so he uses those body parts, and those body parts allow for one body part to give something to another body part. And I'm just basically going through the basics with you right now, but I use the actual words. Yes, we know that there's a penis and there's a vagina and there's a sperm and there's an egg. And so I have this open conversation with my child, and even just explaining that to you. If I was to just stick to the body part and really kind of dance around the obvious issue, at least for my child, that would have been just confusing. As much as it might have been confusing just you trying to understand, well, what exactly do you say, Andrea? I actually say what is going on and what that truth is. And I'm really honest with my kids. And I say it in a very calm, understanding way, not shocked and why are you asking this question? Or where did these questions come from? Because as I've said before in my previous scopes, and if you've seen in my previous Facebook Lives, you know that when you react a certain way for your child looks at things black and white. And they can tell very clearly if you sit up straight as a response to a question, or if you kind of have a wavering in your voice, they know when you're not comfortable. They also know that's a similar reaction that they get, some type of discomfort when they've done something wrong. And so very easily attaching to what they're familiar with, your child can very easily attach, I'm asking this honest question because I don't know, but I'm getting this uncomfortable response from mommy. Maybe I can't ask my questions to mommy. This is what I need you to see, mom. And this is why it's so important to not only be honest with our children, but also provide that safe environment and be prepared for whatever question that they come to you with. Because we want to really sow and lay that good foundation for sowing those seeds that we are trying to implant into our children. And because honesty and trust is so important to us in our home, this is exactly why I'm intentional in how I speak to my children. And so what I really want you to take away when those questions come up, or if that question has already happened, and maybe you didn't handle it right, maybe you really didn't know what to say, maybe you punted. I have a friend that oftentimes when she gets an uncomfortable conversation, she'll say, well, let's ask Miss Andrea. And that's fine. If you don't know the answer, I'm not telling you to create an answer. I'm not even telling you to answer in the exact same way that I have. But what I am encouraging you to do is to be honest, whatever answer that you give. And really focus on that honesty with them and helping them to be honest with you. Asking them questions as to how do they see it? Do they understand what you're talking about? And break it down. You don't have to rush through. I know that's another way that we try to avoid really getting to the nitty-gritty. We think if we go really quickly and kind of skip over those uncomfortable parts, they won't really notice. If you have children like mine, you'll notice. And so in the case of my child, there was no skipping around, and I had to be very clear and understanding and explaining it to him in the very same way that I'm explaining it to you. Because just as much as you need understanding, your children are going to need that understanding, and with those uncomfortable questions as well. So I definitely want to encourage you, be honest, use at least traceable facts. And when I talk about that, you know, if you call a penis or not, that's not the big deal. As long as they understand that that is part of the mechanism, if you're going into that detail with your child, then understand that they're going to learn more about that process. And as they get older and learn more about that process, they are going to be asking you, well, Mom, didn't you say this, but it doesn't quite add up with this? And you don't want to be caught in a lie. I don't care how little or big. You don't want to be caught in a lie when you're trying to establish an honest and truthful relationship with your children. And so that's why make sure whatever you're sharing with your children is truthful and honest, and not just trying to blow over or make it more comfortable or easier for you to explain the situation. Now, having said that, be attentive. You don't need to answer a question that your child is not asking. So if your child is asking, where do babies come from? And they are quite fine and happy with the answer of, well, God helps to put babies inside of mommy's tummy so that they can grow, and eventually when that baby is ready, that baby can come out. If your child is fine with that answer and they continue on with their day with that answer, then everything is good. Yes, be prepared. There may eventually be another question, whether it's in a few days or a few weeks or even a few years. But it still does not change the fact that, one, it's a traceable fact. And two, that you have answered the question that they have. If your child asks more questions or more detailed questions, you want to be attentive to what exactly they're asking. So if your child says, well, Mommy, how does that baby get inside of Mommy's belly? You don't want to have to worry about trying to figure out, I'm trying to think of an example. You don't want to have to worry about trying to figure, well, two mommies and daddies, they're married, or if there's two mommies, there could be two dads. They're not asking about dynamics of families. They're asking about how the baby gets inside the belly. Plain and simple. If you additionally answer that question, they come up with another question. A lot of parents intend to think, well, if you answer too much, then they'll ask more questions. I promise you, if they're asking the question, they're curious. And if you listen to the question that they are asking and you answer that question, then they will get the answer that they're looking for. More questions really just means that they didn't ask the question that they really wanted to know. Or it's in addition to the question that they originally started with. There's nothing wrong with questions. If you have a question, Mom, you don't understand something, maybe it has to do with insurance, and you call the insurance place, if you've ever called an insurance place, how difficult it can be to get your question answered. And you ask that first question to that person, you think you're as clear as day, and they don't answer your question, or they answer it in a vague way, and how frustrating that is for you. It's very similar with your child, that if you don't answer the question they're really asking, it might not be that they used the right words and therefore you didn't understand the question they're asking. So all the more why it needs to be a conversation that you can have and be calm with it, enjoy that moment that they're actually coming to you with that question, and be proud and thank God that they're coming to you with that question. So many children don't feel comfortable even coming to their own parents with questions. And if your child is coming to you with that question, then you need to thank God that he or she is, and be ready to answer it for them. And so listening for that question also helps them know that you are listening to them, and that you are ready to give them the time that they need to understand. We are often very busy, Mom, and I get it. I have 3 little boys, a 9-year-old and twin 7-year-olds, and we don't sit at home twiddling thumbs waiting for questions to come. And so questions come up when you least expect it. It could be while we're on the road, it could be in the car, it could be at bedtime, it could be during the time that people are at the house, it could be anywhere. And so if it's an inappropriate place to have that question, maybe it's a question that one child is asked, but maybe your other children are not interested, or it's not their question, then you can reschedule to talk about that question. But remember to keep to that schedule. So don't tell your child, oh, we'll talk about it later, and not even specify when or how, or forget to even go back to their question. Because think about yourself. If someone promises to call you back and they don't call you back, how do you feel? How important do you feel, or valued do you feel? And these are all the things that your child attaches to the amount of importance and the amount of time that you spend physically with them, and particularly in these difficult, confusing questions that they're dealing with. So again, be attentive, be in that moment, listen carefully to their question, and make sure you're answering the question that they are asking. And also, lastly, don't respond in a fearful way. When you respond in a fearful way, then your child learns that they need to be fearful about whatever that question is, or whatever that topic is, or how related it is. If you think about yourself, go back to when you were starting to learn about sex, or about where babies come from, or any other question for that matter, and when it was not received as well, or when you were scolded or had some other negative reaction related to it. Now you naturally can even think back of how that negatively affected you, and how that made you approach maybe some of those topics or those answers for yourself, and trying to find out the truth for yourself. And this is not what I want to create for my child, and that's why I intentionally make sure that I do not create that kind of environment for my child. I try to intentionally create a different, warm environment so that they do feel comfortable coming and talking to me, and that they know they can continue to do so with whatever question that is. So definitely think about your own fear. Don't try to put it onto your child, and think about just being open. They're not trying to be inappropriate or try to make you uncomfortable. That's not their goal. They just have a question. And it really doesn't have to be as scary as we can often as adults make it, because we add in so many other things that really have nothing to do with the question. All it is your child trying to get understanding of their world, and they're coming to you to help them. And you want to be able to stand firmly, strong beside them as they help to get those answers for themselves. So, as a takeaway for what I'm talking about today, I want you to think about for yourself, what makes you so uncomfortable with some of these questions? What is really the discomfort? I mean, if you have children, you know where babies come from. So it's not because you don't understand the question. Maybe you don't understand how to have that conversation, or how to explain it, because maybe you're concerned about how your child may take it. Why is all of that added in? Why is it so difficult for some moms to, and maybe for you, to have this honest conversation with your child? And I ask you that question because oftentimes the root of our own fears, again, is what we end up placing in terms of what we put onto our children and how we respond or interact with them. And so if you can identify maybe some of the areas that you are uncomfortable with, then you may already be able to identify those questions that you're going to be uncomfortable with if you have not been presented with it yet. Or maybe you've found out which questions you are uncomfortable with. And so I encourage you to really process through those difficulties and that discomfort that you have. And if you don't know how or who to process those discomfort with, I encourage you to reach out to me. In my profile, you will see a link. It's bit.ly/Courage Coach form. And for you guys on Facebook, I'm not sure, the comment is not working right now, but I will still tell you that it's bit.ly/Courage Coach form. One more time, bit.ly/Courage Coach form. If you click on that form, if you go to that link, then you will be able to fill out some questions that will help me understand what exactly you are struggling with as it relates to having these kind of conversations. Maybe you just need to role play. Maybe you're trying to understand how to really have that conversation with your child because they haven't even brought it up yet and you want to be ready. I would love to be able to help you with that. And I would love to be able to walk you through and support you on that, because you're not alone and you don't have to figure it all out on your own. I've definitely gone through it. There are more questions to come, I'm sure of it, but I've definitely mastered the ability to receive their questions without that shock, that initial fright, or without that fear. And I want to be able to encourage you that you can do the same thing, but you do need to intentionally work on opening up those fears so that you can deal with them head on. And sometimes that can be difficult to do on your own. And if it is for you, I would love to be able to help you through that. In addition to this, if this is the type of conversation or the type of relationship that you really want to build with your children, maybe your children are still growing in your little baby, in your belly, or maybe you have a little bit older children, preschool, elementary, or maybe you even have teenagers or even adult children, and you're trying to figure out, how can I have this conversation? Maybe you never learned how to have that conversation or never had that kind of relationship with your own parents, and therefore it makes it a bit more difficult for you to have that kind of conversation with your children. Then I also encourage you to click on the link that's in my title on Periscope. For those of you, it's in my title in Facebook. That bit.ly/being honest with your children. bit.ly/being honest with your children. bit.ly/being honest with your children. If you click on that link, you'll be able to go to my page that explains a lot more about my book, what it's about, and how you'll be able to purchase it. Because I strongly believe that every family really needs to think about intentionally building that type of relationship with their children. And unfortunately, with the culture that we have now, we're so busy, we're too busy. And even though we try and exhaust ourselves trying to build that kind of relationship, if we are not intentional with specific aspects of how we interact with our children, then our culture is going to get to them before we do. And I know you are not exhausting yourself day in and day out just for the culture to now speak into your child's life before you do. So I encourage you to take a look, purchase that book. Christmas is around the corner. We all know families that we care about. You can purchase a book for them. It's available in paperback as well as on ebook form. And bless another family by sharing that book with them. In addition to that, if you are following me on Periscope, you are welcome to share the scope with another mom that you know would be blessed by hearing this information. And definitely, if you're not already, click on that notification button so that you can get notifications on when I am on live again. For those of you on Facebook, you can also follow me on my business page, Andrea Ormsby, and you can pay attention to the different posts that I also post. And you're welcome to do that as well on Periscope. And just basically share my page with another mom that you care about. You can share this particular Facebook Live video with them so that they can start thinking about these ideas, especially if they haven't been already. And let's really work as a community of moms and share the information that we all need so that we can really pour into and intentionally grow our families and train them up in the way that they should go. And do that from a place of strength and courage instead of from a place of fear. Too often, moms are parenting out of fear, and it's not helping us in our efforts, and it's not helping our children as they grow into adults. And so my goal is to encourage you to mother fearlessly, and so that you can reach those goals that you have for your children confidently.